9e.
У нас интервью с Давидом Годшо, генеральным директором компании NAI Becar. Дэвид, CRE.ru в последний раз с вами встречалась 3 года назад. Как вы считаете, что глобального произошло на рынке коммерческой недвижимости России?
Well, the market grew and grew much faster here than in many other parts of the world. It grew faster in Russia than in Europe. It grew faster in Russia than in the US.
Сейчас буквально все новостные ленты пестрят новостями с Кипром. Кризис. Как вы считаете, как банковский кризис на Кипре повлияет на российский рынок недвижимости?
Well, first, it's of course very unfortunate for all the people who lost their money over there, and but it's not the question you're asking me. I don't really think the impact will be significant on Russian real estate market because the quantity of money, the funds that were in Cyprus were relatively small if you compare to the volume of the market in Moscow and St. Petersburg. What can be more worrying is if this kind of crisis in Cyprus is going to repeat itself in other larger countries like Italy or Spain. Because even if there is less Russian money in Italy or Spain, the impact on the Eurozone would be much stronger, and therefore the macroeconomic impact on Russia would be also stronger and have more impact on Russian real estate market.
На ваш взгляд, на рынке коммерческой недвижимости стало больше проектов, основанных на частно-государственном партнерстве?
Yes, there is a trend in the past 3-4 years. It's a good trend. That means the government, federal government, regional governments is generally ready to cooperate and to create projects together with private investors and to give them guarantee that everything is going to go fine from the very beginning until the completion of the project and after. So this is positive because not only for the financial incentives, not only for the legal guarantees, but also because when you have this type of public-private partnership, PPP, we are generally make sure that the interest of the private investor is the same as the interest of the government. So the story is generally nicer from the very beginning. There are a lot of examples. I was yesterday in Yekaterinburg to sign a PPP with the government of the Sverdlovsk Oblast on the development of a large territory around the airport. This is something we enjoy very much doing because we feel the government is now much more open for these kind of projects. We also work a lot with transportation industry, with RGD, everywhere in Russia to help them, so it's also public-private, to help them making the transportation hub more Western and more, it's not only Western, but more efficient and also more attractive from a commercial real estate point of view. It's one thing to have a transportation hub just to have passengers transiting. It's another thing to use this instrument to create some revenue on the retail side, on the hospitality side, on the office market. So these are very positive trends I see in the market.
Чем отличается российский рынок недвижимости от европейского?
Well, I think there are 3 aspects here. The first aspect is that Russia generally, the real estate market in Russia is generally at the same level of quality. If you look at the quality of construction, quality of developments, even in Russian regions, as it is in Europe or in the US. So this has changed a lot in the past 10 years. The second aspect is that Russia is still an emerging market. And it's not related to the real estate market. It's in macroeconomics. It's less liquid. It's more difficult to take your money out if there is a problem. There are less transactions on the market. It is more difficult to think about an exit strategy in 5, 7, or 10 years of time. The third aspect is that the culture is still quite different in everyday life in the real estate market. People are younger. The ways companies are working is relatively more flexible than in Europe. It's more innovative, more experimental. So there are a lot of pluses and a lot of challenges that are deriving from that. But generally, about your question, I think it makes more sense to compare Russia not with Europe, but with other emerging markets, because this is where the money is now coming from, and this is where the money is now going, emerging markets like BRICS.
Получается, что вернее сравнивать российский рынок с рынком стран БРИКС.
Yes, we are in a global world, and investors can compare. They can go to Russia, or they can go to the US, or they can go to Brazil or to China. Russian investors also have a choice. They don't have to stay in Russia. They can invest also in Brazil. They can also invest in China. So what matters is how we compare with other fast-growing markets, not only with Europe and the US. And how do we compare with BRIC markets? Generally, not that well if you compare Moscow to Sao Paulo or Moscow to Shanghai, for instance. And the reason why we don't compare so well is that in all these emerging markets, you have two aspects. One aspect is the local business, the flexibility, the innovation, because it's an emerging market. And the other aspect is the foreign experience, the organizational structure of a company. And how these two aspects work together is critical. In Russia, I still often hear people saying, oh, this works well in the West, but here it is Russia. Like if there was an opposition, there is a West, there is Russia. Here things are different. I often hear people speaking about Western companies in Russia, Russian companies in Russia, and even Soviet-style companies. Like if there should be a difference. In an ideal world, the real estate market should work like a combination of what is good from both sides. A city like Shanghai, a city like Hong Kong, a city like Sao Paulo, a city like Mexico City have managed to mix these two aspects and make them work well together, much better than Moscow or St. Petersburg so far.
Если говорить о региональном развитии, то можно сказать так, что волнует столичный рынок, то безразлично региональному. И наоборот.
Well, the quality in Russian regions is quite similar to the quality you find in Moscow when you look at the construction and development project. But I find it interesting to see that, back to my previous answer, the regions are much more ready to play this game of competing with other global cities than Moscow and St. Petersburg very often. Regional cities are more open to make this mix of local understanding and local flexibility and global experience work well together. In my experience, it's easier to develop public-private partnerships with many regional governments. It is easier for us to come to a region to speak to the government or to find key partners to open an office. We are now looking to expand in many Russian cities, and we have companies coming to us saying, we want your global experience and we want to make it work with our local market understanding. So this is something very positive I see in the Russian regions in this global competition.
Давид, почему это так?
Well, probably because the Russian regions historically always had to compete with Moscow and St. Petersburg in order to attract investors, to attract developers, to attract tenants. Moscow and St. Petersburg have always been dominant in the market, and they are probably less used to make extra effort to improve. This is changing, but so far Russian regions are better prepared, I think.
Как вы считаете, вступление в ВТО повлияет на развитие российского рынка коммерческой недвижимости?
Well, I don't know how to answer this question because I don't know when it will have an impact and if it will have an impact. It's very similar to what I was saying before. It's very much an instrument, the World Trade Organization, and it all depends on us to use it or not to use it. But there is a cultural question here, how we are going to use that to make the market better. So I don't have an answer to this question.
На ваш взгляд, какое событие будет самым ожидаемым на рынке коммерческой недвижимости в 2013 году?
Well, I think there are three trends here. The first one is that we will see more cooperation than now between the government, federal government, and also regional government, and the private sector in the infrastructure sector, and generally to develop large territories in Russian cities. That's number one. Number two, I see more regional development. Companies going further east, not only Moscow, St. Petersburg, but for instance, we are now discussing about opening an office in Vladivostok with local partners over there. And that's something we didn't think about 4 years ago because it was not a priority. Number three, I think the market players must remain very obvious, must remain very conservative, because we don't know what happens in other parts of the world in the next 3-4 years. And we must build and develop projects that are very easy to understand.
Давид, спасибо большое за интервью. Надеемся с вами встретиться в следующий раз.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to that.